Now I want to introduce Bob McConnell. Bob is the principal of R.A. McConnell and Associates. Prior positions include head of government advocacy practice at Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, vice president, Washington for CBS Incorporated, assistant attorney general in the Department of Justice during the Reagan administration for congressional relations. It was, by the way, we talked about Congress a lot today. And he's the co-founder of U.S. Ukraine Foundation. You know, and a personal note, I could just tell you from having known and worked with Bob for a long, long time in this town, that there are few, very few individuals who have done more to help Ukraine in D.C. than Bob McConnell. With that, I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Orest. We're getting obviously to the end of the program, but I'm here to introduce the 60th governor of Maryland, a Maryland native who went to Princeton, played football, captain of the football team, law school at Wake Forest, practiced law in Maryland, then became involved directly in politics, representing a heavily Democratic district in the Maryland House of Delegates, then was elected to Congress, served in Congress in a district that was challenging, never always won by over 25% of the vote, and then ran for governor and was elected governor in 2003. His priorities, among his priorities, were fiscal responsibility, education, and employment. He was highly successful at all of those. During his tenure, the unemployment rate in Maryland significantly dropped and stayed steadily below the national average, despite economic challenging times. He pushed through charter education in Maryland. There were 45 new schools built, 52 refurbished. He started the first Secretary of Disabilities in the United States. And not to go on, but it was Maryland. He dealt with, knew, and worked with very well the Ukrainian American community of Maryland. I don't want to make this too long. He's here to represent the Trump campaign. He is a senior advisor to the Trump campaign, and I ask you to welcome Governor Bob Ehrlich.
Hi, everybody. All right, is there some award we can give you? You've all lasted all day. You're hanging in there. I feel as though I owe you. Is there something we can give out here, sir? I'm the last thing between you and dinner, so I'll try to be brief and leave time for a few questions, and I will be brief. Thanks very much for having me today, by the way. Three general observations, one with regard to domestic politics and why the Trump campaign. Second, just a set of principles in the context of the foreign policy views of Donald Trump. And third, specifically with Ukraine. First, on the domestic front, you've heard him say this, and it's true. I've known this gentleman for many years. He brought the Miss USA pageant to Maryland. We dealt with him. That's how we met. And he was always great to deal with, and that's a big deal for a city and a state, as you know, with regard to jobs and prestige and dollars flowing into a city and a state. But he has been frustrated over the years, going back many decades, if you check the public pronouncements concerning the nature of our economy, the nature of our culture, particularly immigration, particularly trade deals. And you've heard this time and time again throughout the course of the campaign. America's falling behind, and if I can just tell you, and I'll get to foreign policy in a second, I've been around the country a lot. I'm on my book tour and super PAC speeches and Trump speeches and other candidates, and what you suspect, what you think you know is true. Both candidates are talking about, on the left it was Bernie Sanders, on the right it's been Donald Trump. But there is a real sense, a profound sense of angst in our country. It's a function of frustration. It's a function of 1.5% growth. And it's real and it's tangible, and it's not just confined to Western Pennsylvania or Eastern Ohio, but it is predominant in the Rust Belt. And that's precisely the sense that drove Mr. Trump to get in this race in the first place. It's precisely the coalition that allowed him to achieve more votes than any other Republican in the history of the country with regard to primaries. And so here we are. And I'll finish my domestic observations with this. People ask me why, and all the angst, and all, it's technology, and it's success trade deals, and it's lack of growth. And it's also related to lack of growth, sort of how people viewed wealth and entrepreneurship. If you will, just let me use the paradigm of the 1%. When you see from the American left today in Bernie Sanders rallies and sort of the rhetoric from Elizabeth Warren and Hillary Clinton, it's all about the 1%. It's all about evil wealth. It's all about people not paying their fair share. It's all about class warfare and the sense that wealth is bad somehow. Well, in the Trump campaign, it's for the Trump coalition, but not just the Trump coalition, and clearly not just Republicans. There's a sense on the right that it's about the 1%, but we don't dislike the 1%. We don't dislike wealth, but we're getting the feeling, the sinking feeling, that our children, our grandchildren are going to be cut off from the ability to achieve 1% status. That we're going to be cut off from the American dream because our 26-year-old's living in the basement and the local plant's closed. And we don't have really any sense of hope that things are going to get better. And that has been the key foundational observation that has driven the Trump campaign. There's a new, I came into Congress in 1994, the Contract with America, the new majority, and Newt Gingrich, and a renewed sense of hope in America. And so I'm familiar with what a platform, a serious substantive platform can do, and you saw that promulgated last weekend at Gettysburg. The bottom line with regard to all of these issues is an opportunity society. Are we going to restore not just hope? Hope is, we've seen hope and change, and it's been 1% growth. It's not a sense of hope. That's intangible. Jobs are real. Jobs are tangible. That's the substance of the Trump campaign, and that's why I'm here today. Concerning foreign policy, Mr. Trump has been highly critical of American military entanglements that have led to protracted conflicts and needless casualties, wars to nowhere, at great cost to the American taxpayer. When he talks about $20 trillion, folks, it's $20 trillion, and nobody has any idea how to deal with it. And the debate in this campaign concerning costs, not just regard to foreign entanglements, but domestic problems, has been non-existent, unfortunately. A related criticism has been our willingness to convey battlefield schedules to our enemies, which the Clinton-Obama administration has done. It reflects weakness and speaks for itself. The bottom line is a need to articulate to the American public concerning foreign engagements what's at stake at the time and a working definition of success. People need to know why we're going somewhere, the substance and a victory, or at least a definition of victory in the end, what we're doing and why. Donald Trump also understands that dangerous vacuums are created when the greatest force for good on the face of the earth exits stage left. Weakness always begets weakness, and U.S. absence usually results in chaos. And as students of history, as students of United States history, as students of world history, we understand when forces for good exit, miscreants, bad guys tend to fill vacuums. That has been what we've seen from day one in the Obama administration. Mr. Trump understands how inaction can do considerable damage to our interests. Reference the mess that is Syria today, where administration inaction resulted in a destabilized Middle East and a flood of refugees in Europe, and indeed, quite possibly, coming to a neighborhood near you. Mr. Trump believes in a Reagan-esque approach, and it's been very interesting watching some of the criticism, some of the pundits on cable TV throughout the course of this campaign. I lived through the George W. Bush years, obviously, and I saw the Obama campaign use the cowboy Bush, the warmonger indictment of the United States as cowboy around the world. We cannot be the world's policeman. Mr. Trump is no warmonger, but he will be unafraid to project American military might where American assets and interests are at risk. In this context, he stated that all options are on the table with regard to protecting eastern Ukraine. And I would just point out that with regard to the present administration, the Clinton-Obama administration, it's failed that test. It's shown a reticence to project military might along the lines of the anti-war activist the president has been his entire life. And indeed, that was his platform in 2008. Reagan's trust but verify is squarely on point here. Mr. Trump understands how a positive working relationship with Vladimir Putin could help everyone. Now, listen to what I just said, because parroted exactly what Donald Trump has said repeatedly. Could help everyone if both sides wanted it to work. He also understands how an autocrat like Putin seeks to push the envelope when he smells weakness in an opponent, and indeed he's done so, as have miscreants around the world. This has allowed Putin to stop NATO expansion, fracture Georgia, humiliate the West in Syria, bring chaos to eastern Ukraine, and create uncertainty in Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. Mr. Trump's views on NATO apply here as well. If you go and check the record, he has made comments and critiques with regard to NATO that make sense. One, everybody needs to pay their fair share, and they're not doing so. The record speaks for itself. And two, NATO needs to modernize, which it does. Concerning Ukraine, by the way, I've done this a couple times, but here's been my MO concerning today. I wrote this speech, and I didn't check anything other than what I knew from the campaign, and then I ran it by the campaign. They said, yeah, that's good. So it's approved. Mr. Trump believes the world would be better off if NATO had moved to secure the Ukrainian border with Russia on the heels of the Crimea invasion. The U.S. needs to understand, the U.S. president needs to understand that autocrats will always look to generate nationalistic feelings when their domestic problems predominate, hence economic problems in Russia. Mr. Trump knows Mr. Putin is a master at this process, as he does not want the Russian people to focus on their own internal domestic problems. In retrospect, the EU and the U.S. seriously underestimated Russia's reaction to the proposed economic integration of 2013-2014, as we all know. It's similar to how the president downplayed Putin's invasion of Georgia in 2008, and similar to how the Obama-Clinton administration have nothing to show for concessions granted Putin early on with regard to arms control and missiles in Poland. The bottom line, Donald Trump, the Republican Party, understands that Mr. Putin rejects the post-Cold War world as we thought it would be. He believes a helpful U.S. and a stronger NATO will constrain Russia's expansionist ambitions. Mr. Putin must be made to understand he will face longer-term and real punishment in the event of renewed belligerence. The U.S. must work toward Ukraine's long-term peace and security, and that's the bottom line. I have represented Ukrainian Americans for many years in the state legislature, in the Congress of the United States, and as governor of Maryland. I understand this community pretty well. Certainly in West Baltimore, you better understand them because you're going to go down there and campaign with them. And I know for a fact that the majority Ukrainian Marylands have voted Republican over the years, very conservative folks for the most part. I hope to see that voting pattern replicated in 2 weeks. I'll be glad to answer any questions, and thank you for having me today.
During a recent trip to Ukraine, Speaker Newt Gingrich stated a Trump presidency will sell lethal weapons to Ukraine on deferred credit. Can you comment?
Newt was, that's classic Newt. Newt, as you know, is very pro-Ukraine. With regard to lethal weapons, I believe that is the case. That is the position of the campaign. John Bolton and Newt Gingrich will have major roles to play, not just in the Trump transition, but also in the Trump administration. So my admonition, my advice is when Newt Gingrich makes a comment along the lines of what's going to happen, any bilateral relationship, pay attention.
This one will give you a chance, I think, to expand on some things you already said. Governor Ehrlich, I'm a proud Republican conservative, and I'm a big fan of yours as well.
This is my mom, by the way, I think wrote this.
However, in this presidential election, I would have voted for a Republican nominee, despite his imperfections, if it wasn't for Trump's stand on Russia and Ukraine. So my question to you is, what can you tell me about Mr. Trump's position on Russia and Ukraine that would change my mind and would make me comfortable voting for the Republican this time around?
I hope I've answered your question, but let me give you just a little personal aside here. I started out as a John Kasich person. Chairman Kasich was my budget chair when I was a member of Congress. He and I are good personal friends, and I was happy to lend my name in support of his bid for the presidency. There was a book written many years ago that I'm a golfer. Any golfers here? Golf is not a game of perfect, right? Golf is not a game of perfect. Politics is not a game of perfect. Life is not a game of perfect. In this race, you don't have what you might want, you have what you have in front of you. You have Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Whether it's Ukraine, and I think I've answered the question with regard to the two comments that have been most controversial concerning NATO and Putin, but I'll be glad to expand. But in this race, you have a clear philosophical difference between the two major party candidates. I really care about projecting the United States' strength around the world. We are not the world's policemen. We are not warmongers, but the ability to project with conviction U.S. strength around the world is the best thing for fledgling democracies as we know it. I've seen the Clinton-Obama team in action, from red lines in the Middle East to repeated threats without any follow-up. It's weakness, it's indulgence, it's acquiescence, and it invites problems from troublemakers, as it has from the South China Sea throughout the Middle East to Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. But these are not the only issues that I care about. I care about the future of charter schools. I signed the first charter school bill in Maryland. If you really care about poor kids getting an opportunity at the American dream, you've got to believe in competition in the educational workplace. And there's no better place to start than charter schools. Hillary Clinton has promised to shut them down. Donald Trump has promised to expand them. I really believe in the American dream. I'm a working class kid that got a scholarship because I could play football. My mom is a legal secretary. My dad sold cars. My dad never made more than $20,000 a year. And I attended Princeton and Wake Forest, became a United States congressman and governor of Maryland. So I really care about kids and opportunities. When I talk about an opportunity society, I mean it. But that just doesn't mean foreign policy issues, just doesn't mean education. It also means the ability to become wealthy, to start your own business, to really become an entrepreneur. On this account, I think Trump has it clearly. You know, some people say he was born on third base and thinks he had a triple. Well, guess what? He's created a heck of a lot more jobs than Hillary Clinton, who basically, besides the Rose Law Firm, I'll be glad to talk about that, was the only experience she's had in the private sector. We've seen what a community activist can do to our economy over the last 8 years. We better get this growth going in this country. We're going to have a real problem long term. And we're not going to have to worry so much about foreign policy because we're going to be weak, because we will not have grown, and we will have lost that American dream. So when it comes to education, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to the projection of American strength, when it comes to protecting your culture, Maybe we should have a little bit of a wall. Maybe we should have other assets on the border. But I know this. When you have sanctuary cities, where you literally have entire subdivisions in the United States of America telling the federal government, we choose not to follow federal law. We choose to contravene the laws of our country. You're not going to have a country soon, and you're certainly not going to have a culture. I believe we need to protect our culture for our children and grandchildren. I believe Donald Trump is that best bet.
Governor, I'm going to combine two here because I've heard them before. If you would comment on Donald Trump hiring, of course he got rid of him, but hiring Paul Manafort and keeping General Flynn, who has been involved with RT, as his military advisor.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, he's associated with these people, and that raises a concern relating to Russia and
I
to
can
Ukraine.
say for a fact that any serious presidential candidate, any serious governor, any serious member of Congress is going to have a variety of opinions in his or her inner circle. I hired the chief of staff of a former Democratic governor to be part of my inner circle because I knew he did not think like I did and did not see the world as I did, and I wanted him. Now, I thought he was wrong on everything, but I wanted to better understand how he got to the conclusions he got to. And that person became a part of my inner circle and a very trusted advisor because at the bottom line, it's all about loyalty. It's not about agreeing with the boss all the time, at least behind closed doors. I can tell you that Ukraine has a very good friend in Newt Gingrich and a very good friend in John Bolton, and both will have senior positions in this administration.
Mr. Trump said he would consider recognizing Crimea as part of Russian territory. Can you comment?
It's interesting because he said he'd be unpredictable, and he is going to be unpredictable. I'll take unpredictable rather than the predictable of what we've seen over the past 8 years. Unpredictable with regard to Russian aggression, whether Crimea or other places, or aggressors generally, as opposed to acquiescence, indulgence, everything we've seen in this administration with regard to words without meaning and words without any particular backup. I can tell you that the words I've spoken today have been approved at the top of the Trump administration. They represent Donald Trump's views, and I truly believe, or I wouldn't be here today, trust me, because I think I have some credibility in this community over many years, that these words are real.
Can you imagine how Mr. Trump contemplates establishing a positive working relationship with Russia?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. What he said was, and I agree, and I hope we would all agree, that if Vladimir Putin could be convinced to help us kill ISIS, it would be a good thing for the world. I don't disagree with that. I don't think anybody in this room disagrees with it. The problem is Russia appears more interested in killing rebels than killing ISIS. So we complain and we file former statements, and John Kerry runs around the world and says things, and nobody pays attention because we know there are no repercussions for bad acts by bad actors. That's my point. And I believe that a little bit of drama and a little bit of unpredictability with the Trump administration may do certain Mr. Putins of the world not very well.
That's it.
Have I defeated you? I do not want to depress you. But I thank you very much for having me today. This, as I said, and I'm not blowing smoke, this community has been incredibly important in Baltimore City for many, many, many years. And my grandfather was a beat cop in Ukrainian neighborhoods in the 20s and 30s. So I know this community a bit. I know the values of this community. I know the reputation of this community. And I would hope that you would look at the entire record and compare and contrast all the important issues to you, not just Ukraine, but whether it's the budget, whether it's spending, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's labor, whatever it happens to be, that you'll make that comparison and choose Donald Trump. And thank you very much, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Governor Ehrlich, for coming. This is a bell that's been crafted by the blacksmiths of Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine. And it's sounding the alarm for Ukraine, but really also, but more importantly, sounding the alarm for the people of Ukraine who are bearing the heavy cost of Putin's aggression in Ukraine. So if you would take this and give it to Mr. Trump.
I can't keep one myself. I mean, I will give this to Mr. Trump, and I'll tell him what this bell means. And I was, as God is my witness, I was admiring this, right, at the table,
Yes.
not knowing I'd be given this to be given to Mr. Trump. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you.